Welcome back, everybody, to the live webinar here at BINA. So, multiculturalism is a buzzword. Different cultures and faiths living together in harmony, each one keeping their own unique identity, their own unique culture, and everyone just lives peacefully and respectfully together. Now, some are very for this. It gives everyone individual freedom. It gives every religion, every faith, every culture the freedom that they have to choose to live the way they want to, and it's a beautiful and ideal concept. Some are a little more skeptical, and they say that that's exactly what it is. It's ideal and beautiful, but impractical. Cultures clash, people oppose each other, that breeds hate, and the entire society disintegrates. So in other words, that view is that everybody should just mold into one way of living, integrate into whatever country they've come to, and adopt the way of life where they live, and everyone should really be living basically the same way of life. I mean, if you like that for dinner or that for dinner, we don't mind, but in general, the culture should be the same. That's one view. What's the Torah's view on all of this? How do we view multiculturalism? Should people be multicultural? Should there be different cultures living together, or everybody should just mold into one pot? Now, I think that two things can be true at once. This is a general idea in terms of a lot of things. But specifically when it comes to what we're discussing today, both things can be true. On the one hand, we could emphasize everybody's unique way of life and unique culture. On the other hand, there needs to be the one or few things that do unite us and that everybody has the same. So let's discuss this on two levels. Let's first of all discuss this within Judaism itself. So within the Jewish people themselves, there are many different cultures, many different customs, many different ways of life, many different types of foods, many different types of practices. You have Sephardi, you have Ashkenazi, you have Hasidic, non-Hasidic, all different types of ways of life within Judaism itself. Before we get to the society at large, how we should all live together, but just within Judaism itself, is that a good thing that there are so many different cultures? Should we all mold into just one way of being Jewish, one way of serving God, or one way of practicing Judaism? Or we should all bring to the table our unique approach or derech or path in the service of God? And I think the answer is, and we'll explain in a second how we see this within Judaism, that at the core, we all need to be the same. But that core, that essence, can be expressed differently. In the past Torah portions that we've been reading, we speak about how God blesses Abraham, and after that he blesses Yitzchak and Yaakov as well with a similar type of blessing, that his descendants should be numerous. They should be a great nation. But God uses two analogies to bring out how numerous Abraham's descendants will be. On the one hand, he says they'll be like the stars of the heaven, that they will all, just like there are so many stars in the sky, so too your descendants will be like the stars. Sometimes God uses the analogy that your descendants will be like the dust of the earth or the sand at the beach, which are also numerous. But these analogies are not just random. Why do we use both? Why do we use the stars in the sky and the dust of the earth? Both bring out the same point. Why would God choose to use both of them? And I think perhaps we can relate this back to exactly what we're discussing here. The difference between the stars in the sky and the dust of the earth is that the dust of the earth, each speck of dust is not unique. The sand is just, when you go to a beach, you don't notice every kernel of sand. The sand are just meshed together in one sort of thing. It's just one big beach. There's just a lot of sand. You don't see each specific speck, each specific kernel, each specific piece of sand. The stars, on the other hand, yes, you see that there are a lot of them, but you see the difference between each one. In other words, even if you don't notice details of differences, but each one shines on their own Each star is distinct, different, shining its own light onto the world. And the same is true when it comes to Judaism and the different approaches within Judaism, the different customs. On the one hand, we need to be one nation. We need to be together. We need to be all under the same banner called Judaism. Now, that's not just a meaningless term, and whatever I decide it means, it means. No, of course not. Judaism means something. As we've discussed in the webinars in the past, there are the 13 principles of faith. There's 613 commandments set in the Torah. There's the oral law. There are those things which are not up for debate, and you cannot be multicultural about. This is Judaism. If you want to be if you want to practice Judaism, you all need to belong to the same core. On the other hand, there are various approaches of how to express all of that. Even though it seems like there are a lot of rules and it seems to be very rigid exactly what Judaism is, but it's actually surprising how much room there is to express our individual way of practicing Judaism, both on a communal level. So, for example, as we mentioned before, Sephardi and Ashkenazi, both very different cultures, very different types of foods, very different types of customs, all based on the same Torah, all believing in the same 13 principles of faith, but very individual, very different, very distinct, like the dust of the earth, but also like the stars in the sky. Each star is shining on their own. It's interesting that there's a concept in Judaism called loy sisgoidudu, which can mean many things, but one of the ideas of this phrase, loy sisgoidudu, means that we shouldn't make agudois, which means we shouldn't make different groups. What does that mean? So what that means is, for example, if you have a shul which has a certain custom, ideally only that custom should be followed in the shul. People shouldn't come in and have this type of custom and this type of custom and just mesh 1,000 different types of customs together. No, each community, each synagogue has to have its custom, its unique way, and that needs to be emphasized. The difference needs to be emphasized. The classic example which was brought about this is, for example, there are various customs what to do when it comes to Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days, the weekday days of the festivals on Sukkot and Pesach. Should we put on tefillin or should we not put on tefillin? And of course there's a dispute about this, like many things in Judaism. Some people do, some people don't. But it's brought in halachic authorities that if you're in a shul which doesn't put on tefillin, you shouldn't put on tefillin. If you're in a shul which does put on tefillin, you shouldn't be there without tefillin. Now, just to point out that practically nowadays, it's a little more complicated how this applies, because nowadays we are very mixed and very integrated, and therefore everyone has different customs, and not necessarily does this apply nowadays, but the concept is there. The concept is there that if you have a different path within Judaism itself, you need to be proud of that path and stick to that path. And this is your community's custom. It's different than another community's custom. Multicultural, be different, don't necessarily be the same. However, all of these different communities, all of these different customs, in the core, all fall back on the same principles, all fall back on the same 613 commandments, all fall back on the same 13 principles of faith, all fall back on the same Torah. This is all within Judaism itself. But the same thing applies with humanity in general. On the one hand, it's a good thing. Everybody's different. As it says in the Talmud, just like God created everybody's face to look different, our opinions are not the same. Our cultures are not the same. Our way of life is not the same. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing. God created difference for a reason. If everyone would be the same, that's not a good thing. Everyone should be distinct and special and different. On the other hand, there needs to be core values that everybody shares. For example, if I'm of the opinion that murdering is a good thing, which obviously I'm not, but in theory if I was, and you're of the opinion that murdering is a bad thing, we cannot live together in the same society. Such a society we cannot coexist. In order for us to coexist, we need to have a common set of values that we agree on that these are absolute, and we don't move away from them. Beyond those values, we can have different cultures, different foods, different customs. That's not a problem. And this is a very Torah concept. Torah believes that there are 7, what are known as the 7 Noahide laws, that apply to every single human being without difference. No matter what culture, no matter what religion, no matter what faith, no matter where you come from, these 7 Noahide laws apply to everybody. And these are laws of basic morality. Don't kill, don't steal. Yes, belief in one God is one of them, because that means that the morality is coming from one source and is undisputed and is absolute. But the other ones are basic morality. Don't kill, don't steal, don't have forbidden relationships, have courts of law, don't eat a limb of a live animal. Basic moral codes that if you want to be just a basic human being, you need to keep them. If you have that core of basic humanity, if we can share the same common core values of what it means to be a human being, then we can coexist on a very multicultural level. Then already the differences are not real differences. They're differences which are expressing the same core. So these two things we need to be like the dust of the earth. We do need to be all the same when it comes to the core of what it means to be human. But we can be different. How we express being human can be different. Have a wonderful day.